It's been very interesting seeing even globally. So we produce shows like Masked Singer around the world in Australia and New Zealand. We produce I Can See Your Voice in Netherlands and in France. And of course, these are formats that also exist in the US. And I think in the past, American audiences needed the formats to just have that shorthand, to be much more shiny floor, to have a lot of those conventions that American audiences are used to. So the formats would undergo a lot of change. Something's happening. I think both sides are getting closer. I think Korean shows are adopting more Western techniques and conventions, and I think American audiences are getting used to Korean conventions via streamers that are showing the original series. So I think they're finding this midpoint, and I think that's working where you don't have to do as much development as you did in the past. There's not so many changes that you would normally see. And I think there's this really interesting compromise going on where tastes are now converging and the shows are much more pure to their original intention. That I really love. And I think that's partly because of global streamers. That's partly because audiences are now used to seeing things that they wouldn't normally see. I think, even the way panels are in US shows now and judging panels, that sort of classic Korean convention of having comedians. I think that you're seeing that much more here, and I think cultures are just starting to meld in a very interesting way, and I think shows are looking much more pure to their original. If you pick apart Singles Inferno, if you watch it, on the surface, it appears like it's too hot to handle. We produce a show that we're selling around the world called FBoy Island on HBO Max. There's obviously The Bachelor, all those shows. And clearly, Netflix and JTBC were trying to create a show with that same buzz, the same titillating factor of all those shows. But what I love about the show is, and I think American viewers are seeing this, there's almost an anthropological side to this where it almost seems like it was a show that started off with the intention that it would be like these Western shows. But because it's done in Korea, it just has a very different approach. Whenever there's an American, either voiceover or actor in a Korean show, there's always something very different about that actor. Either he's not American, or he's Canadian, or he actually is from the UK and he's putting on an accent. But what I always love is this moment that both takes you out of the reality, but also makes you aware that this is a production. This is not real life. This is fun. And I think there's this element of Singles Inferno where it's capturing such a big audience because people know it's just fun, right? It's not, there aren't going to be people getting married necessarily. It's just escapism. And I think this show has been great in that the intention to create maybe a show that was like Too Hot to Handle has turned into a very different format that I think will do well internationally. And I think that works around the world. So my whole job is to take formats like The Bachelor, like Ellen's Game of Games, like Bachelor in Paradise, and adapt them around the world. And what's great is when it goes to another territory, there's something special that happens there. It becomes a different show. It appeals to different people. There's different format beats, and that ends up changing the format in a very meaningful way, and it just refreshes it. And I see that happening with Singles Inferno. And I think what's interesting about Singles Inferno is it's educating global audiences about issues, right? So there's been a very hot button, buzzy controversy coming out of Singles Inferno where both the in-show but also the comedians and commentators are commenting on the skin color of the contributors. And that's been very interesting because now you open up Forbes and you open up Decider and all of these magazines, and people are now talking about race and what it means to compliment someone, and what does that mean to reference a person's skin tone in a positive way. And I think what's great is, in the same way that Parasite opened up US audiences to maybe a socioeconomic or racial or religious divide, this is opening up audiences here. I think people look inward. They think, okay, wait, maybe there's things going on in other countries that are like ours, and maybe it also opens Koreans up to issues that they hadn't thought of because now there's a global audience looking in. It's sometimes hard to take a look at oneself if you're in your own environment, and I wonder how this will play out. I think this just shows how reality shows, dramas, really play a big part in how we look at where we're from. And I think even if you look at a show like Camellia Blooms, being a single mom, when you look at shows about all the shows about Alzheimer's, and we look at how young people in Korea, but also around the world, take care of their parents and grandparents, I think there's a lot to be gained from these shows, and I think it's a real way for a country when they have their show on a big global streamer to say, this is us, warts and all, what do you think? I think once you're exporting your format, you're not only exporting the show, it's not all about getting format fees, you're also saying, this is us, we're open to being critiqued. And I think it's very interesting. I think conversations, I think it's going to have a meaningful change from race, economics, prejudice, and I think it's very interesting that it's a very palatable way. If it's just in the newspaper or it's politicians talking about it, no one really wants to listen. But things like climate change, which I see in a lot of Korean shows, it's all these issues that are finally being discussed because they're being done. It's almost like the Trojan horse, of it's drawing people in through Speedos and bikinis on the beach with Singles Inferno. But we're talking about really meaningful issues, and I think that's really important.